There's a stage actually called returning with the elixir, where you bring back what you have gained to your people and back to the community as the heroine. And I feel that our stories of the quest are the containers for that elixir. So when you share your story, when you share your experience with other people, you're sharing that with them.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, a global community of women in midlife. I'm here to tell you that it's your time now to rediscover what has always been inside of you and bring that out into the world. If you're wondering what's next, but don't know quite what that is, or if you feel a twinge in your heart telling you that you have so much more to do and so much more to offer, you're in the right place. Ask yourself, if not now, when? Do you want to leave your job, start your own business, take control of your health, reignite the passion in your marriage, write that book, or at least that first chapter? Transitions like this can be daunting, but through listening to my story and interviews with incredible women every week, I hope to inspire you to take action. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of Power Purpose Play. And we are a global platform for women in midlife. Our goal with the Midlife Reinvention Podcast is to inspire you to take action to rediscover yourself, to make your next chapter in life the best chapter ever. Every week, I interview inspiring women who will share their stories of reinvention and how they got to be where they are today. We share key takeaways from each episode, so if you haven't read the show notes from previous episodes, take a look. There's some wonderful lessons to learn from there. Today, I have the distinct honor of speaking with Dr. Nicole Cutts. Dr. Cutts is a keynote speaker, author, and TV and radio commentator. She is also a licensed clinical psychologist, certified executive coach, success coach, and an organizational consultant and trainer. As a former executive producer and host of a radio show in Washington, D.C., Dr. Cutts inspires and empowers people to achieve a more balanced and successful lifestyle, now as a master facilitator and a success coach. In addition, Dr. Cutts is the founder of Vision Quest Retreats, through which she helps women to clarify and achieve their vision of success and brings women together on the heroine's quest for support and inspiration. I'm so pleased to have you on the show today, Dr. Cutts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kavita.
How are you doing today?
I'm well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. A little busy, but well.
Okay, good. Yeah, we all seem to be so busy, right? Even though we're at home, but it's busyness seems to be the thing.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for being here. And I just wanted to kind of dive in. You've had such a varied background, from being a clinical psychologist to a keynote speaker and a commentator, radio and TV commentator, and now to a success and executive coach. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey and what led to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I went to graduate school to become a clinical psychologist right out of undergrad because I had fallen in love with clinical psychology when I was in school. Previous to that, I was not exactly a stellar student. I think I just didn't know how to study. But when I fell in love with that as a study, I was always passionate about different things, right? Mm-hmm. Growing up, I always had interest in a lot of times life science type of things. But when I fell in love with clinical psychology, I decided to continue my studies in that and to become a clinical psychologist. But in about the fourth year of my 5-year program, I fell out of love with clinical psychology as a profession. I still was interested in the field, but I realized that I didn't want the professional life that I had envisioned for myself before. But I was also in the fourth year of a 5-year program, so I went ahead and I finished that. And then I started my search after I graduated for what my next passion was. Mm-hmm. And via a circuitous route, a part of being on the heroine's quest to find that passion, I first came to realizing that I had always liked teaching, working with groups and more organizations. So I parlayed my clinical psychology training into working in organizations, doing more organizational psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Still did a little bit of therapy on the side because I was just starting out and growing this new business called Cutts Consulting. And I still do that today. And then before I started that, I did take a foray back into my art. I was painting for a while working as well.
Just a foray into your painting, that's all.
Well, no, because what I found out is that I had to follow my instinct to find my passion, like just little crumbs or little pebbles would sort of be laid out in front of me. And because what I wanted in looking for what my next passion was, I wanted this burning bush. I wanted my higher power to just tell me what it was. And what I found is that that's not the way that I received the messages and the guidance, is that it really came in small urgings and messages. And then when I would follow that instinct, it would lead me to the next thing. So the painting grew out of a lot of my friends were painting, and I had always participated in art from when I was a child, and even took art classes in college, but I didn't necessarily want to be a professional artist. It's just something I enjoyed, and I had to put it down while I was in graduate school. So I picked it back up and continued to follow that trail and was exhibiting and selling my work. But it wasn't because I thought, okay, well, this is it. I want to be a professional artist. It was just that was one way that I wanted to express myself creatively. And so I did that, and that helped me to get the left side of my brain going in terms of thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do now? And then I started Cutts Consulting. And after Cutts Consulting, although I'm still doing it, I lit upon what I'm really most passionate about, aside from travel, is helping women to clarify and achieve their visions of success for their life's work. So that passion that I was searching for, that word morphed into vision of success. And so then I started Vision Quest Retreats, which I do success coaching with women, have events and retreats, although with the worldwide pandemic that we've been in for more than a year.
Yes.
Definitely put a damper on travel.
Right. I love what you said about looking for your passions and the burning bush, and then listening to your small whispers that you had. And that's what we're really all about here at Power Purpose Play, is listening to that inner voice and pursuing your passions. But I wanted to ask you, and you're also empowering women. And oftentimes, I've talked about this on the show many times, but I love to get different people's insights into how do you advise women, especially who are in midlife, to really pursue their passions? Because we all have limiting beliefs, or we all have these outer obstacles that stop us in a way of achieving those passions or realizing them. So was there any, I know that in your Vision Quest retreats, you talk about that, but is there any tips or any advice you can give to women to address those blocks?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is first you have to be aware of them. So a sign is if you're ambivalent, like if you know that you want to do something, or you feel you want to do something, but you keep procrastinating or starting and stopping or whatever it is, that can often be a sign that there is an internal block. So you have to get quiet also with that to kind of figure out, well, what is it? Is it a self-limiting belief? I mean, having some fear and some apprehension is normal.
Right.
My advice when it comes to fear and other internal blocks is that you have to first be aware of them, kind of unpack them, and then make a decision. It might sound easy, but to literally say, are you willing to let this thing stop you from doing this other thing? There's a quote, I don't know to whom it's attributed, but that everything we want is on the other side of fear. And you mentioned the fact that I take people on this heroine's quest or this journey, and I use the heroine's journey or quest as a model for life. And when you look at any hero or heroine's quest, there are these obstacles. They often show up in the form of, there's something called a threshold guardian.
Mm-hmm.
In a book, in a movie, it might literally be a monster that stands at the threshold of the next level of your advancement on your journey. And so that often shows up as that's a fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems real, but like in so many myths, where if you think about myths where, let's say, the hero is going through the underworld and is told there will be shades and there will be this phantasmagoria, but don't look at it, or you might see it, but no, it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of principle that, sure, I feel it, but it's really there in a way to try to keep me from advancing. So each heroine has to figure out what they need to disarm that threshold guardian or that block or that monster.
Mm-hmm.
You might need to run right at it. You might need to fight it. You need to befriend it. You might need to understand it. It's not one size fits all, but I think it does help when you're aware that what it is guarding, especially the stronger the fear, the stronger the block, the higher the level of advancement when you get past that.
I love that term, threshold guardian. I haven't heard that. That's great. So be aware of it, make a decision, and realize that I guess it's a common thing you talked about the heroine's journey. And since we're talking about that, maybe and delve into a little bit about your Vision Quest retreats and what exactly are they? What is a heroine's journey? And what do you take the women through in this quest?
Well, let's start with the heroine's journey or the quest. Mm-hmm. I really model it predominantly after Joseph Campbell's hero's journey or the monomyth. Joseph Campbell, through his study of mythology and religion, discovered that there's basically this one story that has certain set discernible stages that a hero goes through in becoming a hero, going from a normal person to being a hero. And so, but his isn't the only model. There is also Christopher Vogler and a few others. And then Maureen Murdoch wrote a book called The Heroine's Journey or The Heroine's Quest, because there's criticism of it not necessarily incorporating women.
Right.
That's a discussion for another time. I say take what you resonate from that and leave the rest. But the journey, basically, the main points are that the heroine starts off in the everyday or the mundane world, the known world, and there's a precipitating event, either internal or external, could be both, that propels that person out onto the quest. So they leave the known world, they cross the threshold into the unknown world, and that's where things get kind of crazy. If you think about The Wizard of Oz,
yes,
when Dorothy is taken up in the tornado, and when she gets to Oz, it's a completely different world. It's kind of crazy. If you think about Star Wars, an example of having crossed the threshold is the cantina. I'm talking about the first Star Wars way back in the day. When Luke and et cetera in that cantina and all those weird monsters are there, that's when you know you cross the threshold. And then you have trials and tribulations along the way, tests, if you will, some that you win and some that you lose necessarily. There's no story where the heroine wins every battle. And then there's usually a big main battle, which is where they reach the abyss. Yes. And that is really kind of, if you think about Black Panther, the movie Black Panther, when T'Challa loses the second fight to his cousin and dies, literally. You know, he goes to the underworld, and so that's the abyss, and he encounters his father, and then he returns. So then he is ultimately victorious. And so when you have the final conflict, and in real life, there's no final conflict. We can go on this journey many times, and then you win whatever the prize or the boon is, and you return with that. There's a stage actually called returning with the elixir, where you bring back what you have gained to your people and back to the community as the heroine. And I feel that our stories of the quest are the containers for that elixir. So when you share your story, when you share your experience with other people, you're sharing that with them. So that's the basic understanding that I have and I try to share with my success coaching clients is
Right.
to understand that trials and tribulations, it helps to normalize that.
Yes.
That you're going to have these challenges.
Do you have these recurring, or what part of the journey are you on, for example?
Yes, it can be recurring. And for me right now, I'm trudging the road. So there are the day-to-day challenges and the struggles. I've gotten past some of the larger threshold guardians.
Mm-hmm.
I have not achieved my ultimate vision on this round of the quest, because that would be the full realization of Vision Quest retreats, and which has been slowed by this pandemic, because it very much involves travel. So I am on the road, blogging through daily trials. But in some ways, Kavita, I've actually realized that the life that I created for myself with Cutts Consulting has become the known world. Mm-hmm. And so it's time, especially as the world is coming out of this pandemic, mm-hmm. to leave that again.
Right.
So that's where I am. So in one sense, I'm on the road, but I've reached another point of where the quest itself has sort of become mundane, mm-hmm. because I've been living day to day. Cutts Consulting has become my day job.
Right.
So, and it's become too comfortable. So I'm actually in the contemplation phase of, okay, I need to actually make a break from this. And, mm-hmm. As the world opens up, I think that will be more feasible. Mm.
That's really so interesting. I've never really thought of it this way. And the fact that you can go through so many different journeys and throughout life, and we're all evolving. So that's your work right now. You're talking about your consulting. It does center around inspiration and empowering people to kind of live a balanced and successful lifestyle. So especially these days, it's been a chaos, right? With the pandemic and everything. So how have you advised your clients to achieve kind of a balance in their life through all this chaos, I would say?
So the consulting that I do is in the organizational setting. And so it involves more what people call executive coaching and training around the people issues in organizations, mm-hmm. Things that are related to emotional intelligence. And the undergirding of that is still doing it with an eye toward well-being and having balance. So the advice that I give my clients is, self-care is the most important thing, really. And in this crazy time that we've been in, I think a lot of people have gotten in touch with that, but it's mm-hmm. also become more challenging in many ways. I use somatic coaching techniques in my coaching and therapy and in the organizational setting, which involves increasing your emotional intelligence by putting a focus literally on your body. Soma is the Greek word for body. Mm-hmm. And you can't be balanced and you can't be healthy and have energy and all of that if you're neglecting the body.
Right.
The body is the temple, right?
Of course.
I look at it as this is the vehicle through which everything you do comes. Mm-hmm. So you have to take care of it. It's not an optional thing. Mm-hmm. But the first thing is, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, is paying attention to your body. A lot of the folks that I work with, they're knowledge workers. Mm-hmm. So the work itself doesn't involve their bodies. But you still need to pay attention to it to be fully connected into how you're feeling and how you're thinking, that emotional intelligence awareness piece. And then you can change that. That's the self-management. So there's self-awareness and then self-management. So, for example, you have to know how it feels when you're stressed or tired or pushed too much. Sometimes we ignore that mm-hmm. and we just press on because there's something saying, oh, we just got to keep going.
Right.
But I recommend not ignoring that. So you pay attention to it. And then the management piece is to do something physically to change how you're feeling in your body. Mm-hmm. So it could be something as simple and in the moment as breathing and changing your posture mm-hmm. to send a message to your brain that you are relaxed. And all of this is related to our survival and the fight or flight, right? So we perceive a threat in our environment and stress.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us, most of us, are under a constant low level of stress. And so we might become unaware of what it's doing, but I recommend to actually pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you experience a threat and you tighten up, what's also happening is you're reinforcing the message in your mind that you are under threat.
Mm-hmm.
So even just doing this can produce the feeling that you're under threat. So to change that, to put your shoulders back and down, to breathe, right? So that's something you can do in the moment, day to day. But I very much recommend having a regular physical exercise and practice.
Yep.
Getting out and walking, stepping away from the work. We're mobile with these devices.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that we should be. So, like, for example, I go for walks pretty much every day at the river. I've been going by myself, but now I have a new dog here
as
well. And she's sleeping when she's not walking, so she has no stress. But we go on these walks, and yeah, I have my phone, and I might send a text from, but I really take pains to keep it away. Mm-hmm. Put it in my pocket. I use it for pictures and everything.
Yeah.
It's because it's also about being mindfully in the present. And that actually helps you to conserve energy. Mm-hmm. So people talk about multitasking, but we also have found that that's really not effective. And it leaches your energy when you are trying to be more than one place. Mm-hmm. So that's the other somatic technique, is to be where your body is, to be embodied. So I recommend people to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And again, that instinctual thing.
Yes.
Because as a coach, I don't tell people what to do. I ask them questions to help them get at what I believe they know intuitively.
Right.
So when you get the message, it's like, what is your body saying you need? A nap, rest, stretching, exercise, different food, those kind of things. So I really recommend that you pay attention and get it.
That's so important. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I put the word play in my Power Purpose Play. Play to me means all of those things that you mentioned: understanding your body, listening to it, the somatic, the techniques that you just talked about, and being mindful and present. And I so agree with you that multitasking it can really take a toll on us. And I find that in the last year and a half, I guess, myself have really been in tune with what I want to do, how I feel. And if I'm not active, then, especially because we're so much more on these Zoom calls and we're sitting. And so do you find that people are more attuned to that, and are they more accepting of that? Or sometimes I think women, especially, the self-care part, yes, they do, but sometimes they feel guilty about taking care of themselves or taking that time out. So I just hope that through the pandemic, people are realizing more that it's important to do the self-care bit. Hi, my friend. Kavita here. Do you often feel blocked from moving forward? We all feel that way at times. These are referred to as energy blocks. I've created a short, actionable PDF guide to help you release your negative energy blocks. Click the link in the description to download it now for free. Now, let's get back to the episode. Right?
Yeah. I think that there are a fair number of people who are realizing that. And there are also people who are still just sort of letting the physical forces that be mold them without being aware.
Yes.
But I have talked to several people who are suffering more or less from now being at home and being isolated. And you wake up, you're in the same space, you can sit down. So it doesn't encourage as much movement. So I have heard a lot of people, and also with being in quarantine, a lot of people over this past year and a half have been realizing, like, okay, outside is safer.
Yes.
So that's taken a lot of people outside, which I think is great.
Good. Yeah, that's good. I wanted to go back to some things that you were talking about earlier. You were talking about your painting, and I know that you're also an author. So that's your creativity side. And I'm wondering, I had heard a talk from you recently talking about developing your innate creativity, and you had 4 ways or that you can kind of tap into that. And I thought that was really interesting. So perhaps you could share that with the listeners.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 things that I was talking about come from generativity theory, which is a theory by a man named Robert Epstein. And what he basically says is that we all can increase our creativity by purposely engaging in these 4 things. So one is surrounding, actually looking at because what surrounds you is inspiration for your creativity.
Yes.
So paying attention to your surroundings, changing them, not always being in the same place. So like all of us who are changing that location sometimes, walking a different way, changing your surroundings, broadening, which is similar in a way, but if you think broadening is like broadening your horizons.
Yes.
So traveling, learning about different things, maybe watching media that you don't typically watch. Again, you're adding, the generativity theory basically is like saying the more ingredients you have in your kitchen cabinet, the more possibilities you have to create different dishes. And if it's always the same things, you tend to combine them the same way all the time.
Yes.
Changing them around. Also, challenging is another behavior. Literally, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. We know that when we're challenged, we have to figure things out. Right. So he recommends purposely engaging in challenging situations. A lot of people over this pandemic also have been doing more puzzles, crossword puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, those kinds of things can be challenging. Learning something new. That's the other thing people have done. So that helps. Taking a language course, something like that challenges you. And then the last strategy is capturing. And what that literally means is holding on to the creative ideas that you get. And the first thing is to pay attention to what are quote unquote fertile times for you. And for a lot of folks, that's when we're more relaxed, when our brains are in that beta wave stage, sleeping, going to sleep, newly waking up. A lot of times people get ideas and inspiration in the shower.
Oh, yeah.
I get them on my walks. That's a part of what I use that time for. I kind of leave time at the end of my walk for thinking about something that I'm working on and then having a way of holding on to it. Like you've probably had this experience, and I'm sure many of your listeners have, where you have a dream and you might get some inspiration in the dream and you wake up and you think, oh my gosh, wow, that's a great idea. Should I write that down? No, I'll remember it. That was so vivid. And then they get up later and they're like, what was that?
Yeah.
So
I've actually started writing them down. I've actually woken up and said, that is too good. I've got to write that down. And it's amazing. And then in the morning, you're like, whoa, that was pretty inspirational. Where did that come from?
Right. So you intuitively realize I need to capture that.
Yes.
Right. So that's what he's saying, is that a part of what makes some folks seemingly more creative than others is that they actually have a way of capturing those thoughts. So a lot of times writers have always had like a little pad with them. These days we've got our phones with the voice memo. You get up and you write down once you have a dream.
Yes.
So that's capturing, holding on to the ideas you get to help to increase your creativity.
Really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of these tips are kind of like stretching the brain in different ways, right? And being open to not always following the routine that you have in your life and stretching. Like you said, I love that recipe analogy. That was really great. Yeah.
Yeah. And like what you said of stretching, because those, you call them practices, help you to become more creative, but you also have to be aware of like that box.
Yes.
You know, thinking outside the box. Well, there's also this idea of this box in your mind. And a part of what makes up the box is habit. I've been doing this the same way over and over. So you just keep doing that. And that's also related to like what you said with our brain. Our brain, we learn via connections. So our brain is, not only the neural connections that connect one neuron to the other, but also just putting together mental maps of things.
Yeah.
So once we learn those, we tend to go through those same maps each time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing that to be more creative, you want to be aware of is breaking those. And that's what those 4 practices can help you to do. But you also just want to be on the lookout for things like habits, complacency, fear is another one of the walls of the box. I'm afraid to do something different, which is not entirely our fault because our brains are wired to want a certain amount of certainty, repetition. So once you learn something and it becomes like rote, you can kind of put it on autopilot. And that's one of the ways that we conserve energy.
Right. That actually really reminds me of what, especially women in midlife or people in midlife, they've been doing possibly the same thing, the same job, the same everything for 20, 30 years. And to get out of the routine of being comfortable, which is what I was in the same career for over 20 years. It takes, you have to get outside that box. So it takes, and then you think, oh, well, I'm very comfortable. And what's going to happen if I actually shake those habits or do something different, even though I really want to. So that's going back to those fears and the, what did you call them? The threshold guardians. Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing I think is also important for us to understand is that bias in our brains to want things to be routine and stable is the way our brains are wired naturally. And that kind of can help you stay out of beating yourself up. That fear of change is actually a part of how our brains are designed to work. So back to that certainty principle, and this comes from the field of neuroleadership. And specifically, there's a model of influence called the SCARF model. And SCARF is an acronym that stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And we're getting a little far afield, but I'm going to take the C part, which is the certainty part.
Yes. Is
that before we could get in our car and drive to McDonald's and have them throw a very high calorie Big Mac in our car, humans had to actually burn calories to go and get food, to get the calories in them. So we're not wired to needlessly burn calories. We're actually wired to get the calories and then you want to conserve them. So cavemen they didn't jog or go to the gym or get on their...
Yes.
What they had to do, they ate and they were like, okay, we got food. Great, let's chill. And our bodies are still wired that way.
Yes.
To conserve. So that's why we like things to be somewhat certain, because when you are learning something new, you are burning more energy. And your synapses are popping and firing like...
Isn't that good then? Isn't that a good thing though?
It is to our thinking now.
Okay.
To our thinking, but the way we're wired and instinctually, we are wired to conserve energy. So I jokingly say we're wired to be lazy, but that's our tendency is to try to conserve energy. So when you're challenged to learn something, you're burning more energy, you have to have a certain number of behavioral repertoires that are more or less rote. Because imagine if everything you did from sun up to sundown was completely novel. You have to figure out how to get food. You have to figure out how to get clean. You have to figure out how to get from one spot to the other, to turn on your computer, to drive your car. You would be exhausted.
Yes.
By the end of the day. So you want to have a certain number of things that are routine. So you can just sort of put those on autopilot and use your brain and your energy for other things. That's what I'm saying. We really are more naturally wired to conserve energy. And that's also why people are, we see them as being resistant to change. But a part of what it is our desire for certainty. It's a whole thing about, it's just like fight or flight. It's the threat.
I was just going to say, yeah. Wow.
So we need certainty to feel secure. And when you anticipate uncertainty or when you experience uncertainty, it reads in your brain as a threat, something new, something different.
Yes.
That's why we're wired like that. Like when you're learning things, you're going to pay more attention to things that are dangerous. Like you're walking through the field, you see flowers and butterflies. Oh, that's lovely. But if you see something like a lion or a cougar,
right,
You have to have that reaction to be able to do it. So we're wired to like pay attention to stuff like that. We're also wired to conserve energy.
It's fascinating. I could talk to you about this for
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It's really cool. So just to kind of maybe switch gears a little bit, I know that one of your specialties or what things that you're working on right now is really around diversity and cultural competence. And what are some of the initiatives you're working on? And especially these issues now are very out there, especially in the US, right? So maybe you could let us know what you're doing in that respect.
Yeah. So part of the Cutts consulting side of my life, and as an organizational consultant, that's one of the things that I offer is diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting and training. And I look at it more as being culturally competent. So it's something I've always offered and it's been in my repertoire, but of late, in the United States, because in higher demand before, and then if things leveled off, we become complacent. We think, we don't need that. But of course, with the last administration, the Trump administration, really stirring up of the racism and the bias and the prejudice and all that stuff that's always been here, but stoking it, stirring up, emboldening people, it's become a larger problem in a lot of ways. And people are becoming more aware of it. So it's really reached a boiling point last year, May 25th, when George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis, and the ensuing protests that happened all over the United States and the rest of the world. Because what happened, Kavita, and this is me speaking as a Black American, we were always aware of this and, been talking about it forever.
Yes.
But it sort of reached that tipping point where I guess enough things had happened. And then the seeing George Floyd murdered publicly by a policeman and just everything that went with it really woke a lot of people up. And to the point where people who had the privilege of not having to deal with racism decided they wanted to do something and make a difference. And it's not that there have not always been allies, people who don't have to do this that have not done it, because that's not true.
Right.
But I think there was a critical mass of people who woke up, and that was translated into corporations and other organizational settings where the organizations themselves, the leadership and the people in the organizations were demanding that they change their cultures and really look at that and look at what they can do for their clients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So because of that, I started there's a huge influx, obviously, of requests for work around facilitating discussions around racism, helping people to create their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, set up diversity, equity, and inclusion committees to carry out the work, to deal with the stress around that.
Yes.
And I've gotten all sorts of calls, like to come in and talk to, like there's a Black owned accounting firm that I've done work with in the past that wanted somebody to come in and talk to folks about how to cope with the increased stress of what was going on. Associations I've worked with, like I said, to help them get their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives together. People want training on microaggressions, unconscious bias. And again, my preference is to talk about cultural competence. So without having cultural competence, you're not going to have an effective diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, or you won't know how to actually make it a part of the culture, because cultural change is difficult.
So what is cultural competence?
So cultural competence is really made up of three main components. And those three things are awareness, knowledge, and skills. And the awareness piece, and this is why I really like this, because it has to do with self, right?
Yep.
So a lot of folks who have had any sort of diversity training, it centers around looking at minorities or the others, right? So that unfortunately, what it does is it perpetuates the thinking of sort of the majority, the norm, and these others. Cultural competence says, just like in emotional intelligence, and I see the two as being very much related, you need to become first aware of your own identity and the layers of your identity. And the layers are, demographics like sex, sexual orientation, gender, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So being aware, not just what they are, like, okay, I'm a woman, great, but what that means for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how does that influence my thinking, choices, biases, values? Where have I maybe experienced prejudice around these things or privilege, right? Mm-hmm. Around these different layers. So that's the first piece, is the awareness of what your layers of identity mean for you, both currently and also historically, mm-hmm. and how that influences you. The second piece, knowledge, is the part where you look outside at not just other people, because like you and I are both women, mm-hmm. so it's not just other people, but learning about the layers of difference. So the things that I'm not intimately aware of, right? Your background, your experience, religion, all of those things. The knowledge is actually learning more about right. other experiences, both historical and current, their influences,
yes,
their language, culture, all of that. And then the skills piece is then now, okay, so I've increased my self-awareness, and let's say I've learned about your background, I don't know where your family came from in the world before.
Well, I'm Indian, and I was born in Kenya.
Okay. So you have a unique experience. You were born in Kenya, but your parents are both from India?
Well, my parents actually were born in Kenya as well, and we moved to Canada in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in Canada. Okay. But my grandparents are from India. So,
okay, so you had more of the influence of Kenya really than...
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it is an interesting little history story, is that a lot of my grandparents' generation, mm-hmm. there was a lot of Indians that were brought to Africa to build the Kenyan railways. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you see a lot of Indians who are born and raised in Africa. But while we have the traditions coming from Africa, it's still the Indian traditions are very strong.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That was a little aside, but
no, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
But so I don't know a lot about that history, culture. Like, you didn't just move to Kenya. You were second generation of folks living in Kenya, yes. right? So the knowledge piece would be, okay, so I'm aware of my background and maybe what influences me, but then learning about your background, what influences you, that's the knowledge piece. But then the interaction is the skills piece, that third component of cultural competence, right? How do we have conversations? How do we get along? Like, for example, we hear a lot about microaggressions these days, right? What if I made an assumption about you just based on the way that you look and just ran with that? I could, you call it, perpetuate microaggressions against you via that, right? And that's the skills part, is how do I then communicate and interact with you? Is it skillfully, or is it not so skillfully? Things like jokes. People make jokes and commit microaggressions that way.
Yes.
And the skills part, again, so much like emotional intelligence, is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Some people would say, oh, you don't ask about people's backgrounds. Okay.
Why not?
Because some people do get offended, right?
Right.
Like, where are you from? Why do you need to know that? Right? And the person could even be well-intentioned, but the other person gets offended.
Yes.
A great example, I know we're getting a little far, but there's a comedian named Hari Kondabolu, whose parents are from South Asia. And he was in a coffee shop, and this man a white man asked him where he was from. And I think I don't know if he's from New York or Connecticut, but someplace like that. Oh, no. I mean, really, where's your family from? And he said he's been through this a million times. He didn't feel like playing this game.
Yes. And
so he went ahead and he subjected himself to it. But then he went back and he said he wanted to say to the man, a lot of people don't, I didn't really like that. A lot of people don't like that. And instead of that man being culturally competent and skillful and saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that, he told him, well, I've asked a ton of people that question and they don't have a problem with it. So there must be something wrong with you.
Mm.
So that's not emotionally intelligent, nor is it culturally competent, right? Around that issue, right? So even something like that, if you do say something around somebody's identity that offends them, then how do you respond?
How do you respond? Right.
Being called out, essentially.
I think of those three, I think the knowledge piece is so important because I'm thinking about when before we got on the call, you were talking about working with Asian Americans now and how there's so much prejudice against them, and that the knowledge piece, I think, really understanding where is this person, what's the background, and how do I react, rather than just a knee-jerk reaction based on what they look like or the circumstances that are happening in the world. So the work that you're doing is so incredibly important.
Yeah, it is. And that's the good thing about, in a way, I'm being grounded from not doing Vision Quest retreats, but my skills in terms of Cutts consulting are being used in a way that's important right now. Doesn't mean I'm not eager to get back to Vision Quest retreats.
I was going to say, so what's the next step on your Heroine's journey?
I am going to Ethiopia.
Oh, really?
I've been grounded for too long.
Yes.
Travel is like, if I ask people sometimes, if money were no object, what would you be doing? And for me, that would just be traveling the world. So
me too.
Yeah. So I am heading to Ethiopia in a couple of weeks.
Oh, I thought you were joking. Okay. No, you really are. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, I'm coming back.
Okay.
But I'm for now, but I'm going for a couple of weeks.
Lovely.
I need a break. I want to get away.
Yes.
I love traveling. I have a friend who's over there right now. So
that's amazing.
I'm going to go over there and I'm going to not do any work. I'm just going to be writing. So I'm working on my third book.
Oh, tell us about that.
Adventures of Isabel.
I've
written books 1 and 2, and book 3 is in the works right now. I mean, total first draft. I'm still legal pad writing it down and then typing it in. So that's really all I'm going to do about work nature. It's not really work, but is to write while I'm over there and see. And I love also doing travel writing, like blogging and videos and things like that. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm also going to take some time to think about my next step, because I have recently become aware that what I've been doing, all the work that I've been doing, has become the known world for me. And it's time to, light out again.
Step out of your comfort zone. Out of the box, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. That sounds so great. I'm jealous because I love to write too. But that would be a nice place to get the creativity going.
Yeah. Well, you can go, like, I take little writing retreats all the time.
Yes.
So, up in Canada, I'm sure there are a lot of cool
Yes. We just have to find them. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and your work is probably all virtual, right?
It is. Yeah, exactly. We'll have to look into that. Yeah. So fantastic. So perhaps you can let our audience know where they can find you if they're looking for whether it's on the retreats or your consulting, and any comments you want to make before we end it off.
If your audience is interested in my consulting work, I have a website, which is cuttsconsulting.com, and Cutts is Cutts, for the Vision Quest retreats, via which I work with women, predominantly on helping them to clarify their visions of success. I have a website for that also, which is visionquestretreats.com. You can also find both of those on Facebook. On Facebook, it's Vision Quest Retreats with Dr. Nicole Cutts. And those are LinkedIn, Nicole Cutts, easy places to find me.
And we'll have all those in the show notes. So we'll make sure that people can access you. And then you look forward to your new book as well. Let us know when that's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can check out that page, which is The Adventures of Isabel on Facebook.
Great. Thank you so much. Anything else that you wanted to add, or?
I would just encourage your listeners to, if something is in their heart to do it. As Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. So what gives you life? What makes you happy? Do that thing.
It's so true. Follow your heart, and the rest will work itself out, I think. Right?
Yeah. And if not, you'll be happy on the way.
That's right. Follow the journey.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And
My pleasure.
whoever's listening, please, if you're interested, we'll have the Dr. Cutts information on our show notes, and have a wonderful trip.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy it. And we're looking forward to seeing the next book. I so enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Nicole Cutts today. I felt like we could have spoken for hours, and her insights into the heroine's journey and topics like innate creativity and cultural competence are so fascinating and informative. She is a wealth of information, and we can all learn how to navigate challenges in our lives through her teachings. Here are her main takeaways. Number 1, be aware of your blocks, unpack them, and make a decision. Are you willing to let this thing stop you from getting what you want? Everything we want is on the other side of fear. Number 2, the heroine's journey is a model for life. Each heroine has to figure out what they need to do to disarm that threshold guardian. You might need to run right at it. You might need to fight it. You might need to befriend it or understand it. In real life, there is no final conflict. We can go on this journey many times. And when you win, whatever the prize is, you return with the elixir. Bring back what you have gained to your people or community as the heroine. Our stories or our quests are the containers for that elixir. 4, you can't be balanced or healthy if you're neglecting your body. It's the vehicle by which everything you do comes from. You have to take care of it. It's not an optional thing. 5, to tap into your innate creativity, use number 1, surroundings. Change them for inspiration. 2, broadening our horizons through travel, learning different things. 3, challenging. Engage in things that stretch you. And 4, capturing. Holding on to the creative ideas that you get. 6, when we are learning something new, we are burning energy. We are wired to be lazy because our tendency is to conserve energy. We need certainty to feel secure, and when you experience uncertainty, it reads in your brain as a threat. 7, the more ingredients you have in your kitchen cabinet, the more possibility you have to create different dishes. 8, being culturally competent involves 3 components. Number 1, awareness of your own identity and what that means for you. 2, knowledge of other people's backgrounds. And 3, skills. How do we get along or adopt our skills based on our awareness and our knowledge? 9, if there's something in your heart that you want to do, just do it. What gives you life or what makes you happy? Do that. I so enjoy bringing these incredible conversations to you every week. Thank you for listening, sharing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. It helps to get our message out that midlife is a time for reinvention and rediscovery. We have so much to offer the world. Please join our community at powerpurposeplay.ca and tell your friends about it. We are kicking off our inaugural program today called It's My Time Now, How to Rediscover Yourself in Midlife, and I'm so excited about that. If you're interested in learning more, as we're going to be launching this again soon, email me at kavita@powerpurposeplay.ca. Enjoy a beautiful first week of June. I can't believe how time is flying by, but enjoy every moment. Till next time.